Okay, this is the fourth lecture for Chapter 16 and 17, Non-Renewable Resources, and some renewable resources. And just to cap this off again really quick, why don't we have more nuclear power plants? Why aren't we making more? Two main reasons. One is the incredible cost that goes into producing these things, and the second one is perceived fear that something could go terribly wrong. So we haven't built any in a long time. So when these things go into non-production, again, there's a lot that goes into putting these things down, and they don't really go away. So if you compare it to, say, a windmill, I turn it off, okay, it's just sitting there. I'm not having to worry about the waste product of it for years and years and years. I don't like it, I tear it down. Okay. This little graphic here isn't... well, the main source of it just kind of goes to show that most of our energy is actually wasted. Looking at it, it says 84%. Whoops. Kind of got ahead of myself here. Let me change this over to my pointer. There we go. Back up one more. There we go. We look at it and say that 84% of our energy actually is wasted, and some of it is just natural. Whenever you're transferring one form of energy to, say, electricity to get into your house, that is a huge loss of energy based on the second law of thermodynamics. The rest of it is based on some inefficiencies. So we could actually create more energy just by being wiser in its usage. But a lot of it is just lost based on the production process of it. Okay. Fusion, this is the holy grail of energy. If we could ever figure this out, everything would be perfect. So there's a couple limiting resources involved, but the main fuel is water. So if we had an unlimited supply of water, and we're pretty close to having that, we would be okay. It's actually deuterium, which is one of the main fuels, which is like heavy water. That would make things a lot better for everyone, but we haven't been able to sustain it. We got a little video that follows here that you can watch on your own that gets into that a little bit. It's a little 60-minute clip. If I can get past this. There we go. So a little clip here that goes and talks about some of our very inefficient substances. I think we're going to do a little exercise in class that talks about this. Light bulbs, and those things, those incandescent bulbs that we may still have in our homes, they're very, very inefficient. Most of it is just heat. We get the light, but most of it's heat. Our cars are incredibly inefficient. So we can do all sorts of different things, make the car small, more aerodynamic, but because it's an internal combustion, in other words, I'm generating a lot of heat, internal combustion engine, it's just by nature very inefficient because its job is not to push the car forward, it's to generate heat, and it's not good at what it does. So electric cars are much better than that, but not by a whole bunch. Nuclear power plants, as you can see, those things are very inefficient as well, and they're coal-fired power plants. So these are all bad ideas, yet we're all very familiar with them. There's some other things that we could and should be using instead. So this is, again, just looking at some comparisons. How would you rather heat your home? You have two parts, which are both 100% to start with. Uranium, generating electricity. By the time it gets to your house, you only got about 14 parts of the original amount that was there. When you look at sunlight coming into your house, well, out of the 100, you get 90 parts of it. So it's a pretty good deal. That would be a nice one to pursue. A couple ways to increase our efficiency is use that cogeneration. So you're using that energy source, call it coal, for creating electricity and heat at the same time. So you're getting both out of them. And just using cars, and we're looking at this all the time. This year we were looking at the auto show, and one of the materials they're using for now cars is aluminum. Aluminum is much lighter than iron. Aluminum has an atomic weight of about 26, and iron has an atomic weight of twice as much, about 55. So using lighter and lighter materials, carbons, 12, that's a lot better ideas than using things like iron. So some of these things trying to cheat the system, but the problem is you still have an internal combustion engine. We have to get around that because in itself it's just very inefficient. So just looking again, price of gasoline. We talked about this before. We can see that's, we use a lot of oil, and it's not going to get any cheaper over time. This graph ending here in 2006, don't you wish gas was $2.50? Yeah, it's not going down. So we can see. I remember back in the day, probably mid 80s, when gas, not even on this graph, was about $1. So I remember back when gas actually cost about $1. And that's never going to happen again. So I think I had this in here already. Why am I seeing this a second time? But we'll just take a look and say, okay, this is the average for CAFE. That's a little acronym that probably will show up at one time or another, just looking at fuel efficiency. We really haven't increased much in a long time. So some other ways we can increase efficiency. Green roofs, don't see a whole lot of those. I know they have one over at the Ford Rouge factory, but we don't see them a whole lot in subdivisions and such. And I think there's probably some difficulties along the way. I've seen some good advertisements on them, but we haven't seen a lot of them. They're not really in mass production yet, but they do have some definite advantages in regards to energy efficiency, lowering the loss of heat through a roof and the cooling in the summer. They have some definite upsides. This one here I find interesting, but it's a pretty ugly house, let's be honest. It also reminds me of the Three Little Pigs, the little straw house, which tells me that it probably blows down pretty easily. But on the good side, it is a super insulated house, and I guess that's good. I'd have to actually take a look at this and really, really be sold on it. But just looking at it, okay, no. This is a little demonstration or picture that kind of shows where we lose a lot of our heat. Cracks, windows, they're very inefficient. Here we are sitting on a day in January. It's about -10 outside today. It's really, really cold. Go stand by a window and you'll see just how inefficient they are. So the more windows you have in the house, which is very nice, the more energy you're probably losing out them, because just by design, they're not very efficient. So looking at renewable resources, this one's focusing more on like solar, but a lot of these are relatively cheap after the infrastructure is in place. So they all have these different upfront costs, but once they're in place, renewables are fairly cheap, but they don't have as much bang for the buck in regards to high energy content. But it's usually something that is, long standing. The energy is going to be there forever. So comparatively, we have these non-renewables. We're all very familiar with these. Natural gas, oil, coal, nuclear. These are all finite. They won't last forever. We have other ones which are biofuels, wood, soybeans, corn, whatever you'd like to look at. These are mostly renewable if we use them wisely. And then you have ones that pretty much no matter what we do, we can't run out. These non-depletable resources. So these are ones I would think we should probably pursue. And again, these are more things you could do on an individual basis. And we could ask ourselves, well, why is it we don't use these? And it has a lot to do with subsidies, government subsidies. There is an incredible amount of money that goes into subsidizing nuclear, coal, oil. They receive a lot of money from the government to do their business. And it's interesting that they also make an incredible amount of money. There's a lot of profit involved in selling that substance to people. These down here, not so much. They're not given a whole lot of government subsidies. And as far as who's making money, well, it's a free resource. So entrepreneurs don't pursue that as much as they could with these substances up here at the top that they can sell outright and make a profit. All right, good place to break. We'll do the 5th lecture here in just a few moments.